Well, good afternoon and welcome to, can you guys believe this, episode 44
I love
of the,
that.
isn't that unreal? Episode 44 of the M&C Communications Move the Stairs podcast. We are recording on Friday, July 9th. I'm not sure how it got to be July, but here we are. And we are so happy that you've joined in on this conversation. So as you know, each week we tackle with you some of your biggest brand protection challenges. And we call this brand protection PR. And what we do is help CBD businesses tackle and turn some of these challenges to advantages. So that's what brand protection PR is.
So today we're talking to CBD business owners, and we're talking about expanding your business internationally and what that means for brand protection. So by the end of this episode, you'll be able to understand the considerations for international expansion and how to protect your brand, which is what we're all about.
Absolutely. So as you're moving forward, what we always like to do here for our podcast records is break these down into our 3 mini conversations. So for the first part of the podcast, we're going to be talking about how you'll learn what to consider for your international expansion, followed by strategies for preparing your brand for that. And then eventually, how you're going to protect your brand as you move across and expand internationally.
Right. And if you're joining us live, please jump into the conversation and let us know, are you considering expanding internationally with your CBD business? You can leave the answer to that in the comments section. And if you're joining us later, we'd love it if you'd post your questions or comments, and we'll get to those in next week's chat.
All right. Well, let's take it away here. So we also have our free downloadable one sheet with every episode, and it's how to harness the 4 C's of communication. This is a big one here on the Move the Stairs podcast. It is. So make sure you log on to movethestairs.com and you can grab that for free. All right, let's get going.
So today we'd like to welcome Sara Durnil, who's Joy Organics Domestic and International Partnership Advisor. So Sara, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I'm interested, well, let's first say Hannah Smith was going to join us, but she's a little bit under the weather. So Sara, we got your expertise and we are thrilled to have it. So we just read that Joy Organics, and you're based in Fort Collins, Colorado, right?
Yes.
But you're expanding to Hong Kong, and this is like so exciting.
Yes, it is very exciting. It was daunting for a long time, and we just jumped in with both feet and are learning just a multitude of things about the Hong Kong markets and trying to take it by storm.
Fantastic.
We are so excited to get to pick your brain about this. Yes. So when you're thinking about it, what is the number one consideration for the brand, for Joy Organics, when deciding whether to expand internationally or deciding how to expand internationally?
Right.
Yeah. So that is, such a good question. It was a little daunting at first, especially because we dabbled to begin with, just trying to learn the market. CBD is such a difficult thing to navigate, even in the United States sometimes, much less country to country. Yep. So, and then at the beginning of our real launch, COVID hit. So we put everything on hold, especially because the number one factor was that transporting the goods, especially through customs. We like to do everything by air, not by sea at this phase. It just became pretty astronomical to get product over. So we put that on hold. Just like so many things got put on hold for a little while. And now we're really excited to jump into it. And we decided on the Hong Kong market simply because that's where we got the most organic interest. We didn't go into a PR strategy in any particular country. What we did was make our information available on our website, and we put some SEO in place to be found, and Hong Kong came out as the clear leader, besides Australia, but that's a whole nother story. Australia is kind of a no-no for us right now. But yeah, it's a really organic start to how we've done things.
That's a really interesting answer. You know, leveraging SEO, looking at how your website metrics kind of helped build that, you know, customer loyalty, or what could be customer loyalty in the international market. And that's one of our three pillars here for brand protection PR to MNC Communications: the customer loyalty, insider media relations, which just means, you know, how we think and can react and kind of get into the brains of, you know, media, and also the opportunity in crisis forecasting. So I'm really excited throughout this podcast to pick your brain about each of those three topics, Sara. So I think we take them one at a time and kind of see how you and your team work to get to where you are today.
Right. So you've had to develop a customer base, and PR is obviously part of that mix. So what's your plan for getting and keeping customers in Hong Kong and developing that customer loyalty in a brand new market where you don't even speak the language?
Well, we're very fortunate that English is the international language of business. So definitely have some advantages there. Also, just, you know, the very first thing that I made it a point to do is get to know the culture, get to know, you know, not only do we have the time zone to deal with, but, you know, definitely knowing how business is done in Hong Kong is very important. And that goes for any country that you're going to expand into. The cultural differences is really important to research. So it's just a matter of, like I said, we went to an organic approach to begin with, just having information on our website, being able to be found around the world, and then being able to see what manifests itself without a huge amount of PR. Once we saw that Hong Kong was emerging as a market that was definitely interested, and keep in mind, they're very green right now. They are where we were years ago. So we're kind of starting over in a new market. Right. The big part of that is, you know, get that press release out, get that distributed. And as Hannah would have told you if she could have been here, having an organic communication, a very sincere communication with journalists is just an excellent strategy. Really, you can send out a general press release, but sometimes it's going to take getting a company that can translate for your region. It's going to take relationships with journalists who are familiar enough with the CBD space, but also want to learn more. So definitely having those things in mind to get the interest, and then keeping the interest, because you've got two sets of customers: business to business, and then business to consumer, depending on how you want to expand internationally.
I would think that there is a great opportunity to use education, because you have great education on your website. I love your website. In fact, I use your salve almost every day. And I just, you know, that education piece, and the fact that there's always new education, because we're constantly learning more as more and more research comes out, would give you an opportunity to really have a lot to talk to your customers in the US, but also in Hong Kong about, especially if they're starting from behind where we are. You have so much information that you can repurpose over there because they haven't seen it. It's all new to them. Is that right? Am I on the right track there?
You hit the nail on the head. And it's very daunting space when you first get started. And we have been through so much, and we have so much education out there now on our YouTube page. We have anything from how to develop your SEO to compensate for not being able to do Google ads, for example. We've got all the way down to an educational video playlist that will train your employees on each of our products. So we're able to push that into a new market and show, hey, we've been there, we've done that, and we've got things in place for their success. But really, education is huge. Right now, the most popular product is a tincture that you would put under your tongue. Right. They are familiar with that concept, but they don't necessarily know why. And it's really important getting right down to the endocannabinoid system and talking to people about what's happening within the body. And then, okay, here's the products that you can use. And here's what we see the benefits.
I just feel like this is a master class. I hope that people are taking notes because I mean, it's like the sensitivity to the new culture and education, and then this direct conversations with media, and then backed up with everything that you have available on the website is just a phenomenal amount of outreach, and really respectful outreach. I think that's what it strikes me the most about it.
Yes, I love that phrase, respectful outreach. You've got to know where your audience is in their journey within the CBD space. And it's really easy to overwhelm people, especially if you're going to get into the cultivation of the hemp, the extraction, what's happening within the body, like I mentioned. But it is a lot to take in. And what we tried to do is just start people with the basics. One thing about Hong Kong that we cannot do in the United States is they are able to quote specific ailments and what a particular product would do for that.
So
interesting.
That's huge. That's a huge difference, right?
It's a huge difference. Here's our issue is that we still do everything according to FDA regulations on our label. So if somebody wants to private label through us, we still are going to do compliant labels to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So we have not branched into any kind of labeling Hong Kong rules, any kind of standards that they're doing that, where they simply need to present their product as a U.S. product to the Hong Kong market.
It's interesting. We work with Greenheart out of Ireland, and the EU is even more stringent than the US is. So here you're going to Hong Kong, which is so smart because of how you determined what that target audience was going to be. And you're using the education, and you're able to talk about this. I'm really interested, if I wanted to drill down on, how are you getting customers? Is it are you relying on your B2B and then they're educating their customers, or are you educating customers directly to who Joy Organics is?
Great question. What we've decided to do for this phase of expanding into Hong Kong is work only business to business. There are really some challenges with shipping individual consumer orders directly to Hong Kong, between the customs paperwork and which carriers will do what. We've decided to focus on business to business.
Great.
So what I do is try to get these businesses to understand. I would say 9 out of 10 people coming to us right now are pursuing a business opportunity, where a lot of people come to us domestically because they want to help others, if that makes sense. There's two different motivations.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the Hong Kong professionals I'm working with see this as a monetary opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we've got to put the why behind that.
Yes.
So we're starting with the businesses, getting them to understand what CBD is, what the CBD space is, then all the details of the logistics of getting it to them, talk to them about marketing, having them do their own research on what they can and can't say, because we're not experts on that.
Right.
I think that just shows that you've done your research in terms of target market. So, one of the things that we do when we're working with clients is really define that target market. And then you can figure out what's the messaging and what's the information that market needs and what's going to resonate with them. So I think that's really, really smart. Mm-hmm. So now it's your turn. In the comments section, I want you in podcast land to tell us, what do you think would be the best tactic to develop loyal customers? And we've heard some amazing tactics from Sara from Joy Organics. But let us know, what do you think what would be the best tactic to develop loyal customers in a foreign expansion?
And don't forget, we've got the free downloadable, the 4 C's of communication. You can log on to movethestairs.com and get that and start working that into your messaging and really watch some things change for you.
And remember, move the stairs means that you take what life gives you, or you look for opportunities like Sara has, and you make the absolute most of them. You don't worry about if only this, or could it be changed for that? If I only had this, things would be so much better. No, you look at what you have and you really focus in and you make the most of it and you move the stairs.
So we mentioned this earlier here, brand protection, PR, insider media relations, looking at some of those ways you can make inroads and networking with reporters. And got to tell you, it's tough enough to do here in the United States, Sara. So how has your team kind of gone about to forge those relationships in a foreign country like Hong Kong?
Well, what we started with was just a really well-written press release. And I will tell you, we've used all the most expensive tools domestically, anything that you can distribute electronically. But what it comes down to is choosing some good channels, focusing on those, seeing what gets back to you organically, and then following up. It's not just about one press release and being done. It's about really forging those relationships with journalists, which I'm sure you could help people with.
Seeing a lot of nodding heads here.
Yeah, I'm like, wow,
Yes.
that was a good statement. Okay.
That was. Sarah, let me interrupt you for a minute. You may not know this, but we're all former journalists. So our whole team are former journalists who've worked from the smallest stations up to the networks. And so we are right there with you. And we think that the relationship building is what really matters when it comes down to it, not the broad brush release that could, you could get millions of impressions, but are they the impressions for the right people?
Right.
Exactly. And that's one thing about Joy Organics is we are a very transparent, organically based company as far as relationships, from the way that Hannah handles communication to the way our sales process works. We're about the transparency, the connection, the relationship. In fact, we call our customers partners because we are in there for them to help them succeed. Obviously, the trickle-down effect is very good for us. Plus, we get to have the CBD out into the world, which is life-changing.
That's right. Absolutely. But I want to ask out in podcast land, how would you reach out to foreign journalists? How would you go about really developing those relationships? Because when it comes right down to it, if you want to get that story in, that relationship can make all the difference in the world. It'll save you time. It will save you money. And the tone and tenor of whatever they're writing is going to be better, I can promise you, if you have a relationship and they're not just writing it off a release. Would you agree, Sara?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I like opportunities to speak versus just having, a standard article from a journalist based off of the press release. It does start to look canned, especially when several publications are writing almost the exact same thing. So, really getting that relationship so you can get the interview and you can enhance things anytime you've got a forum like this, a podcast, a webinar. It's really going to behoove you to jump right into those.
That's such a great point.
Yep.
And, since we're talking about journalists and building these relationships with journalists, we want to look ahead just for a moment to next week, next Move the Stairs in a couple of weeks, actually, where you are going to hear from a reporter. And so we'll get this, talking about insider media relations, you're going to hear from a reporter about what she likes and doesn't like in a story pitch. And so, Sara, if you have any thoughts on, if you got to talk to a reporter who covers cannabis, what would you ask about how to get your message out, how to get your story out? What would be those biggest questions that percolate in your head that you would love to get a straight answer from a journalist about?
I would love to know from a journalist what really piques their interest. Ask them, the first question is why? Why are you reaching out? What did you like about that press release? And what was not included in that press release that you would like to know? So I think that a press release really should be approached as a teaser. And Hannah can tell you this, that it is the responses and those opportunities to expand that are going to be the most valuable.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating feedback there. We're going to have to pass that soundbite along to our reporter friend in a couple of weeks there. All right, let's move on to topic number 3 here. Predicting both opportunities and challenges in messaging. That is the third part of brand protection PR. And man, expanding to an international market, you're going to have a lot of that probably on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to see that as things get more regulated in the United States, the international market's going to jump in.
Right.
So many people do watch what the United States does with business policies and regulations and such. So this is the time to be poising yourself. You don't want to wait until everybody's jumping into the market. So that's what our philosophy is here. And brand protection is very, very important. There's a number of regulations from country to country that you have to keep up with. For example, we thought UK was going to be our first market. And then they went into novel food registration.
Right.
And it's extremely difficult to get that. And so we have decided to focus just on topicals in the UK, but that is not going to be our primary market. That's why everything that we did was narrowed down to Hong Kong as far as our PR for now.
That's so funny. I have some friends in London and we sent them some beard oil because the husband has this great big beard and it had CBD in it. And he's like, we cannot get that out of customs for love nor money. He's like, here's some like CBD oil from Colorado. And the customs in London was like, I don't think so.
That's a whole nother topic. That's a whole nother podcast about
Right.
talking about customs and having the right. It's really so important to have the right partnerships if you're going to expand internationally. We have an amazing freight forwarder who acts as a consultant. They are also who most of our Hong Kong people choose to use for forwarding. But the biggest thing is to know customs. Sometimes the laws in a country don't even match what customs knows. You gotta go with what customs will release. So
Absolutely. I also think it's very interesting, and I'm sure you have people on the ground. I just think about last summer and the craziness that happened so quickly, where we had so much cultural change in our country that you had to respond to. And I would think when you're dealing with a foreign country, you don't want to be 3 or 4 days behind, because if you're not on top of that kind of stuff, it can really hurt your business. So how do you deal with that? Because we always talk about forecasting for both opportunities and challenges so that you're prepared and you're not caught flat-footed. How do you deal with that when you're in a foreign country like Hong Kong?
It goes back to knowing the culture a little bit, but one of the biggest things that I have to do is set expectations on communication. Because of the time differences, and I shift my work hours around depending on whether it's a domestic or international day, and make things available, but also using the tools that they use for business. For example, WhatsApp. I couldn't survive without it. A lot of Zooms. So because we're not going to be having face-to-face meetings, right. And it's so much better to be looking in people's eyes when you're talking. So, it's really about staying as relevant as you can and proactively giving information versus waiting for them to come to you with questions. So a lot of proactive, a lot of connection.
Do you use Telegram, Sarah, at all? No. Oh, check Telegram out. We use Telegram a lot with our Irish company.
Wonderful to know.
It really it's pretty amazing who's on Telegram as well. But I think that's phenomenal. You have to be able to know what's going on. And, with you doing both domestic and are you going to be doing both for a long time? Because I would think you'd never sleep.
No, we're just transitioning into having a dedicated international department. So, but you don't just drop people you've been working with for 3 years and tell them too bad, so sad, I'm going away.
Right.
So there is a transition plan in place.
How many hours ahead is Hong Kong? Is it 15 or 18?
14, I believe.
14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you're really working in different days.
Yes.
Yeah. And the nice thing is having gotten to know the business culture in Hong Kong, they are very used to doing international business. So it's not phasing them a whole lot. That was something I thought there'd be a lot of objections, because quite honestly, in the United States, there's an instant gratification type of communication, right? I mean, we're used to getting text returns like that.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that with the Hong Kong partners, they understand what it means to do international business, especially with the United States. So it's been refreshing.
How about journalists? Do they also, because journalists also expect, our rule is 15 minutes. If you get a request, you turn it around in 15 minutes. You're at least on the phone with them, finding out more about what they want. So, but I would think if somebody's calling you from Hong Kong, do they have an expectation that it could be hours or even tomorrow?
That's a good question for Hannah, because she handles all of our PR. And just knowing the culture of our company, I am sure that it's an instant response. But if they're emailing her in the middle of the night, it just is going to be how it pans out.
It reminds me of being in the newsroom, guys, right? It doesn't matter. Overnight, you're going to go.
Sleeping in the newsroom. Awesome.
Exactly. Well, I would love to ask you in podcast land how you would deal with opportunities and challenges in a foreign country, and how you would think about it. I think, not many companies are doing what you're doing, Sara. You're really at the forefront of this. And so you're a trailblazer from that standpoint. So many people I would think listening are like, wow, I never thought of this, or there's so much to think about this. So it's phenomenal to have this time to talk to you and listen to how you deal with the opportunities and challenges. I have one last question for you, and that is there any opportunity that came up that you weren't expecting that you were like, wow, that was a get I never thought about. That was a real positive I never thought about. Anything like that? And I'm hitting you cold with this question. So if you don't have an answer, do not worry. So.
Well, no, that's fine. It's Hong Kong in general was a surprise. It really was. Like I said, we started in the UK. We thought that was going to be the most synergistic, and it ends up that Hong Kong is where the United States was 5 years ago.
Wow, that's great.
And so that was the big, just keeping your eyes open, and start small, do baby steps. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. As you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, it's about realizing that you can work things out as you go along. Just jump in and do it.
Love that. I love that. Jump in and do it and move those stairs. Right, guys?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And we're just going to recap right here very quickly to what we talked about today on Move the Stairs, what to consider. And you gave us some great considerations, Sara, for international expansion, how to prepare your brand for international expansion. I particularly love those, very respectful interactions that you talked through, and then how to protect your brand internationally and how to think about those opportunities that, kind of percolate up out of nowhere and jump on them. So thank you so much, Sara. We really, really appreciate your conversation today on Move the Stairs.
I was so happy to be here. A great podcast. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. We're honored to have you. And we want you to know, if you're listening, we can help you at any time. Drop us a line. If you have any questions, there are so many ways to get a hold of us. You can do it on social. You can do it on YouTube. There's like 1,000 different ways. Any place that you're going to look for, we're going to be we are on WhatsApp, and we are everywhere. That's right. So if you're listening to Hong Kong and you got a question, we're here. So thanks so much. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you real soon.